What's up YouTube, Capital G here, checking out the brand new FLUFFAL support that just got revealed coming out of Rise of the Duelist. Konami is really going all in on the fusion support, aren't they, in this set? Because obviously if you give people new FLUFFALs, they're gonna expect a fusion monster, which of course we're getting. And then the cover card of the set is fusion based, Dark Lords are getting a fusion, man, everything's just coming up fusion so far. Now I personally believe that FLUFFALs they're a pretty solid deck for the new format in Master Rule 5. They basically only lost instant fusion, I guess you could say like a copy or two of instant fusion, but they still do have the really strong openings even going first, and this new support definitely makes the deck better and more versatile. So let's go ahead and jump into these cards. Our first new monster is going to be FLUFFAL Dolphin. It's a level 4 water fairy monster, 1600 attack, 1000 defense, and then both of your first and second effects are hard once per turn. Your first effect says you can target one toy vendor in your graveyard, set it to your field, and if you do, send one Edge Imp Sabers or FLUFFAL monster from your deck to the graveyard. Second effect, if this card is sent to the graveyard as fusion material, you can shuffle one polymerization spell or fusion spell from among your banished cards or your graveyard cards into your deck. So this really feels like a solid card for FLUFFALs, and it honestly makes me think that FLUFFALs are just going to become Toy Vendor Turbo. Obviously, we know about Toy Vendor and how important it is in the FLUFFAL deck, and basically if you resolve like Wings in Toy Vendor, how much advantage you can get from that, because you get to draw a bunch of cards, you also get a search off of Toy Vendor. The thing about it is, while FLUFFAL Bear and FLUFFAL Wings are hard once per turns, Toy Vendor is actually not a hard once per turn. If you keep sending Toy Vendor to the graveyard, you can just keep getting searches and searches and searches. This card allows you to get that Toy Vendor back from your graveyard, put it on the field, and potentially use it again. In addition to that, and kind of spoiler alert, there are now more ways of sending Toy Vendor to the graveyard. It doesn't just have synergy with Wings and Bear. Some of these new cards also interact with it. So I kind of feel like the FLUFFAL deck is just going to become Toy Vendor Turbo. I think you're definitely going to run this card, because I think in some situations this could even be a better normal summon than Dog. Also, and this is my last point, the fact that this card is level 4 water, that's just really convenient and good. We already know that FLUFFALs have the ability to make Bahamut Shark totally awesome. Now you just have another card that can facilitate that play. Next up is their brand new fusion monster. This is FRIGHTFUR Cruel Whale. It's a level 9 water fiend monster, 2600 attack, 2400 defense. Your materials are an Edge Imp monster plus a FLUFFAL monster, which in terms of FRIGHTFURs, that's as generic as it's going to get. It's basically like summoning Kraken. First effect says if this card is fusion summoned, you can destroy one card on each side of the field. Second effect, once per turn, and this is a quick effect, you can target one fusion monster you control, send one FRIGHTFUR card from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard, except another copy of FRIGHTFUR Cruel Whale, and if you do, the target gains attack equal to half its original attack until the end of this turn. Okay, so I love this card, and I think it's very useful. As the FLUFFAL players in the Facebook group pointed out, and this was something I didn't even realize about FLUFFALs, FLUFFALs have a lot of removal. However, they don't really have any non-targeting removal. You've got great removal in FLUFFALs, cards like FRIGHTFUR Tiger and FRIGHTFUR Kraken, but they all specifically target. So if FLUFFALs are ever, dealing with like a Bolo Dragon or some big monster that can't be targeted, a lot of times it can be very difficult. This card is finally your non-targeting removal for the FLUFFAL deck, and that's obviously going to be something that players can use. Not only can you go after monsters, but this can also take out back row on your opponent's side of the field. Non-targeting removal, you guys know I just love that. I think it's the best. In addition to that, and this card to me feels like it's going to be used very similarly to something like FRIGHTFUR Kraken. I think the attack gain effect is excellent, because honestly, like this card, even if you just target itself, it's going to gain 1300 attack basically for free. Just dump any of your random FRIGHTFUR monsters in your extra deck that you're not using, just drop those guys into the graveyard, and now this card is almost 4k attack. And of course, it works on any of your other monsters in case you're going to get a little more attack out of them. It's a quick effect, which means it can also be a defensive tool if you don't actually kill your opponents, or you are technically like forced to go first. And when you really look at the effect that makes you send a card on both sides of the field to the graveyard, now you're starting to understand why putting the Toy Vendor back on your field actually makes a lot of sense when it comes to the FLUFFAL Dolphin, the card we just talked about, because if you're putting it back on your field, now you have have kind of fodder, right? You can summon your Cruel Well, you can pop the Toy Vendor you put back on the field, get rid of an opponent's card, and then you get another search off the Toy Vendor because, again, Toy Vendor is not a hard once per turn. So I think you'll definitely play one copy of this card. I don't know that you need to play multiples. I think I would still probably play like 2 Kraken, but I would definitely, like 100%, you need to be playing at least one copy of this card in your extra deck. Next up is Edge Imp Scythe. This is a level 3 Dark Fiend monster, 1000 attack, 0 defense. Your first and second effects are both hard once per turn. The first effect is really interesting. It says during your opponent's main phase, this is a quick effect. That's the most interesting thing about it. You can reveal this card from your hand, fusion summon 1 Frightfur fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control or have in your hand as materials, including this card. Second effect, if a Frightfur fusion monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. So the most interesting thing about this card should be kind of evident, and that is the fact that it allows you to fusion summon even going second. Like if you're just going second, you can fusion summon during your opponent's turn. Now the first thing I did with this card, or when I was thinking about this card, was I looked up FRIGHTFUR Tiger because I was like, bro, if you can use this to go into Tiger during your opponent's turn and pop 2 of their cards, like that's actually going to be insane. Unfortunately, FRIGHTFUR Tiger specifically requires Edge Imp Sabers, so that play is not going to work. I do think that like situationally, maybe every once in a while, going into a FRIGHTFUR Cruel Well, the fusion monster we just talked about, during your opponent's turn, if they're going first, like that can be pretty good. I mean, you can disrupt one of your opponent's combos with that, and keep in mind, the Cruel Well won't actually destroy itself because you can just use the Scythe from the graveyard to make sure that it actually isn't going to be destroyed. So you basically just get to keep your Cruel Well, and then maybe you can try to beat them down when it comes back to your turn. That disruption can obviously kind of serve as a hand trap, essentially. Like if your opponent's playing a super combo deck and they have a choke point, you can use this kind of to disrupt them, and it almost is it's a hand trap basically at that point. I think this card's probably a 0 to 1 of, depending on which FLUFFAL player you end up talking to. But yeah, I think if maybe we would have been able to use this card during the battle phase and the end phase as well, then you could have seen the ceiling of this card be raised significantly, and we could have started talking about multiples. But 0 to 1 is probably what you're looking at. Now to the spells and traps. We got Frightfur Repair, which is a normal spell card. The effects are both hard once per turns, but they're like the Thunder Dragon cards. You have to pick and choose. You can't use both effects in the same turn. The first effect says target 1 Frightfur fusion monster in your graveyard, return it to the extra deck, and if you do, special summon 1 FLUFFAL or Edge Imp monster from your graveyard. Second effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 1 FLUFFAL or Edge Imp monster from your hand. So Frightfur Repair reminds me very much of Frightfur Reborn. These are not bad cards per se. I just think that they're like very situational cards, probably a little too situational for the taste of most FLUFFAL players. Number one, these are not cards that I think you really want in your opening hand because they're not like Frightfur Patchwork. These are not cards that you can just activate arbitrarily as like your first play. They require a little bit of setup. If you look at the first effect of this card, you have to have a Frightfur monster already in your graveyard, and even then, you're basically just getting a 1-for-1. You're just getting a monster reborn on one of your Edge Imp or FLUFFAL monsters, and it's like, all right, that's cool, but I'm not sure that that's going to completely change things. I actually might like the second effect a little more, and that's because the second effect works very well with the Frightfur Cruel Well. So what you can do is never even think about activating this card, right? You can just set it on the field. You can summon your Cruel Well. You can use its basically Scrap Dragon-like effect. You can send this to the graveyard, send one of your opponent's cards, and then you can banish this and summon another FLUFFAL monster like from your hand. So if we're looking at, you know, potentially dropping your Dolphin and FLUFFAL Dog in the same turn, you know, both getting both of those cards on field, this could be another way of getting more damage out of your hand or getting a search effect from Dog or just something like that. I don't know if I would play this card though. It definitely feels like it's a 0 to 1 of, because again, I think in the early game, this is a card that could potentially brick your hand. I think maybe after like turn 2, it's always going to be live, but we know FLUFFALs is, I mean, it's a deck that wants to go second and OTK your opponent within the first turn. So I don't know if you can afford to have dead cards in FLUFFALs, especially when you're already going to be integrating new cards into your deck like FLUFFAL Dolphin. I think I would just try to stay as far away from the potential bricks as possible. Our final card is a trap card. This is Frightfur Vendor, which it's basically Toy Vendor 2.0. So it's a continuous trap, and the first effect says this card's name becomes Toy Vendor while it is on the field or in the graveyard. Second effect, once per turn, you can discard one card, that's a cost, draw one card, and if you do, reveal it. If it is an Agent monster, you can destroy one card on the field. Otherwise, put one card from your hand to the top or bottom of your deck. Third effect, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, half its attack until the end of the turn. So this is basically just like a trap version of Toy Vendor. It can potentially serve as disruption. If you're forced to go first, you can technically disrupt your opponent. However, it is very RNG, and that means you don't have a lot of control over it. I mean, basically, if you use the effect and you draw one and you discard one and you happen to draw an Agent Sabers or an Agent Scythe, you get to pop a card on your opponent's side of the field for free, and that definitely feels very nice. However, as I said, you're not in control over that, and I'm not a very big fan of RNG luck-based cards. If you do happen to top deck Scythe, like that could be cool because you get a free pop. Then you could even use Scythe's effect and, you know, go on the Cruel Well and get another pop, and that would be really awesome. But again, that's all just completely luck-based, and I don't know if FLUFFAL players really want to do that. The fact that this card is Toy Vendor on the field and in the graveyard is kind of nice because it does have synergy with Wings. It also has synergy with the Dolphin, but I don't know, it just feels like this card can be completely hit or miss. Like if you're going first, I see some merits to it because it can potentially give you disruption, and FLUFFALs would definitely want that. But at the same time, it's completely random disruption. And if you're going second, I'm not really sure that this card is worth it because it's just a way lower ceiling version of Toy Vendor because you can't just get it from your deck. Now, if this card counted as Toy Vendor in the deck, then I'd be like, all right, maybe we run 2 Toy Vendors and we run 1 copy of this just to have, you know, more options and stuff. But I'm not really sure that I can justify running this card. If it was always guaranteed you got to pop something, I would probably say this is a one-of, but the fact that it's luck-based popping, I don't really know if I can sell this card. Anyways, whatever you guys think of the new FLUFFAL support, overall I like it because the 2 monsters I believe are really good, even Scythe potentially, so I think 3 of these cards could easily be played in the FLUFFAL deck, and I'm all for, you know, making a deck better, especially an older deck. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.